All right, glad to have you back. Let's now talk to lead consultant and chief executive officer, 2612 Consulting and Professional Services. Well, he's not in the studio today. He's joining us live from London, United Kingdom. It's good to have you on the show, Mr. Peter Adebayo.
Thank you once again, Tolu, for having me on your studio. I'm quite eager to come to your premises to see that beautiful edifice that I just put up.
Yes, we will definitely be happy to have you join us in our studio. Let's start the conversation today and look at revenue issues. Of course, what's been happening. Government has been looking so much, so some say so ambitious, what government wants to work on with regards to our 2025 budget. How does it come to you, and how feasible do you think some of these projections are? How feasible are they to you in your thoughts?
Well, thank you once again, Tolu, for that question. The issue of revenue generation will remain an integral part of national development across the globe. If you look at the budget that has been passed, it's a budget that came in as 49.74 trillion, which at the time of passage ended up becoming 54.99 trillion. Of course, this is not to be unexpected. It is typical. It is natural. When an appropriation bill is passed to the National Assembly, you expect that it's going to go through modifications, and eventually there will be a figure. So it's been a part of the process, all along. But when you look at the figures there, each time I look at Nigerian budget figure, there's something that still frightens me, or there's something that still amuses me. I usually don't want to convert it to dollars, because by the time I convert it to dollars, you discover that it is still very, very small, relative to the size of our economy and the size of our population. But that is a story for another day. If you look at the revenue projections for the year, on the basis of the initial 49.74, it's an improvement, over what we had in the previous year. Last year, our revenue projection was, about 20, initially about over 18 trillion, before the increase of 6 trillion through supplementary budget. But I think this year now we are targeting, 34 trillion.39. That is even before the increase to 54.9. But again, if you look at it, of course, that's 88%, which is quite encouraging, right? But then, if you look at the expenditure aspect, you know that we still have a lot at hand.
Do you think, because many would think maybe the revised, the tax reforms and all of that is what government will be focusing on. How do you think that this funding will come through, for Nigerians for government to actualize this without too much of external borrowings?
Sincerely speaking, it has been a major issue, Tolu. Like I've always said, I've said it on this platform, and I've said it, quite in quite a number of places. There is nothing wrong in borrowing. There are two dimensions to financing public expenditure anywhere. You can finance your public expenditure through borrowing. In other words, that is through debts options, or you can also consider non-debt options. More often than not, it is a combination of both debt options and non-debt options that make it possible for you to finance your projections. But if you look at this year now, I know it's going to be a bit challenging, because looking at 36 aggregate revenue vis-a-vis the 54.99 now, that leaves us with a gap of maybe about 18 trillion, or close to, no, I think that's about 13.3 precisely that we need to fund. The question is, must we continue to borrow? Under the present circumstance, we don't have a choice. We still have to borrow, But while we are thinking of borrowing, what other options are available? All right. there is also a need for us to probably consider some of the infrastructures that we are trying to put up and ask ourselves, what is the best way to fund them? Can we take cognizance of private sector participation? In other words, I remember there was a time, that the issue of infrastructural development was given an incentive that private individuals who are going to be involved in spending or funding infrastructural development with particular emphasis on road network, that they can enjoy some tax incentives. How much of a leverage we have been able to give to that is another question entirely. But I think this is one of the areas, that we can consider to fund our expenditure. Now, there is one thing in expenditure management system. If I'm constrained with increasing my revenue under a circumstance, one other veritable tool that we can look at is to be a lot more prudent in our expenditure management system, because going through the expenditure management system, you discover that I try to look at the chunk, and this year alone now, we'll be funding the expenditure to the tune of 13.38 trillion. And if you look at the portion of the expenditure, which is actually the driving force, ordinarily, in budgeting, you are expected to aggregate your revenue and target your expenditure towards it. But unfortunately, over the years, we seem to have been, driving our expenditure as a major focus, as against tying our expenditure to revenue. What do I mean, Tolu? We need to establish, okay, fine, if we know what we are getting this year is 38 trillion or 40 trillion, what can we do to minimize our exposure to debt? And the only thing we can do under that circumstance is to be a lot more prudent. Because if you look at this expenditure, statutory reserves, debt servicing, recurrent expenditure, between debt servicing and recurrent expenditure alone, we're talking about over 30 trillion. So if we are going to be servicing debt and recurrent expenditure with over 30 trillion, that leaves us with just about 14 or 15 trillion to spend on capital expenditure. And if you don't have more budget voted for capital expenditure, it makes it difficult for us to drive infrastructural development. You want to agree with me that infrastructural deficit in Nigeria is so wide. So I would still want to advocate the part of our strategy must be, it's going to come with a lot of sacrifice on the part of those who are in government. And this takes us to, managing economically the cost of governance. I still think we are doing it. We're trying our best, but I believe we can do a lot more in trying to curtail our cost of governance, because, like I said, by the time you add recurrent expenditure of over 14 trillion with debt servicing of over 16 trillion, that has accounted for about 60 or 65% of the entire expenditure profile. And I believe that it is not something that we cannot do if we are very committed and necessary to address this.
Mr. Debayo, please hold your thoughts for a minute. We have a breaking news. We'll come back to this conversation in 1 minute. Thank you for staying with us. Well, let's continue with our conversation where we'll try to connect with our other guests with regards to the invasion at Ikeja Electricity Distribution Company. We're going to be looking at that discussion and see what really happened there. We're also trying to reach the Air Force authorities so that we also hear from them so that we balance this report and know what really happened today at that point. What Mr. Debayo, we're looking at where we stopped. Our non-oil space is somewhere that I think that we have opportunities to generate more revenue for government. And for me, I don't know how well we are doing with regards to that. So I'm thinking, what are you thinking around that space? How can we do better with regards to that end?
Sincerely speaking, non-oil revenue generation option will still remain a viable option any day. You see, because if you are borrowing and you keep borrowing, you need to ask yourself, why are you borrowing? You can't be borrowing consistently. I try to look at the statistics of the quantum of what we're going to be financing, that 13 point something trillion. And I came to realize that about 69% of that financing, of that funding need, is towards debt service. Loan is about 20%. And of course, others, 2%. So it still means we are borrowing. So that takes me to this advocacy for diversification. We have ample opportunity to tap into diversification. Now, let's take agriculture. Tolu, agriculture alone, if we do what we ought to do in Nigeria, with the entire landscape across the geographical boundaries of Nigeria, not only are we going to be feeding Nigeria, we have what it takes to feed the entire Africa from agriculture. Now, solid minerals is there. We have said it over and over. These are key areas of economic opportunities that require attention. We can develop tourism and make money from tourism. We look at our risk sector. We need to revive our risk sector. The reason why we are running our economy today based on dollar here and there is because we are running an import-dependent economy. Our risk sector development sector, our risk sector has suffered a lot of neglect over the years. Now, if risk sector can be revived, employment opportunities will be created. If we can look in the direction of agriculture, agriculture is also multifaceted, very huge potentials in agriculture. Now, look at Dubai, for instance. Dubai was a desert. They took a bold step that, look, they wanted to embrace development of their nation, and they gave themselves a 20-year development plan. And today, look at what Dubai has become. Dubai generates enormous, resources by way of revenue and that's why you see majority of our people here now, if they want to, if they're not going to go to Europe or anywhere, they go to Dubai, acquire properties and quite a number of things like that. So these are potentials that we can focus on to be able to diversify our revenue base. Look at tax, for instance. Who could have imagined that the quantum of what we are generating today from tax revenue, that we can generate it? Technically speaking now, it's like the tax revenue has displaced, quote unquote, our oil revenue. And that does not mean we should neglect that sector. Thank God that, we understand that, one or two refineries are working. It still takes us to the fact that, look, we must do everything humanly possible. And that's why I'm hoping, I'm praying that God will give, the president the backing to be able to make that impact once and for all. I can imagine 2 refineries, 3 refineries working at full capacity in Nigeria. You know what that means? Not only are we going to meet our needs, we will be exporting. I think until we get to a level where we have zero value for importation, we are still not there. So these are areas that have potential. I've just told you that this 54.99 trillion budget, even at 1,005 or 1,006 or 1,650, so take your calculator and translate it. It's just about $33 billion. $33 billion compared to American economy. It's just a fragment of an expenditure in the United States of America. Go to the UK. What do they have? They rely on tax system. So all of these various resources centers, all we need to just do is to recalibrate our strategies and be more committed to generate more. And we must invest massively in agriculture, in real sector development, in tourism, as well as other non-oil, Of course, bitumen is some parts of Nigeria. I think Ondo State there, they have bitumen. Bitumen, if we give attention to that resource, it's a natural resource. You don't have an idea what we can get from there. So while we continue to do well on tax, so that it doesn't look like our attention is restricted now to tax, it is very good. Tax has been, if you look at under this administration, the kind of thing that we have not generated, if you look at the tax revenue from tax alone, annually, from the inception of this administration now, it's enough to cater for 3 years budget, over the past years. So that's a good step in the right direction. But while we are doing that, we cannot afford to rest on our oars. We need to tap into all this because the resources are there. That's why, I ask people, don't ask me what we don't have in Nigeria, all right? Ask me what is it that we don't have. And the only thing we just need to do better is to be able to at least get it right in the area of leadership and right governance. I mean, if you can do all of this, I mean, I know you guys are going to ask me questions around the tax reform. Thank God that it has been done. I mean, we are making progress there.
Exactly. Let me butt in there and ask you that we've gotten to a point where there's a town hall, public hearing, everyone's bearing their minds, manufacturers, business owners, politicians, civil society groups, everyone's maintaining, letting Nigerians know what they think about this reforms. Now, how does that come to you? Because some are expecting that this will be passed into law, maybe say by mid-year latest.
Well, I don't even pray to do that. We get to mid-year before we pass it into law, quite frankly. Because the earlier we pass it into law, the better for us to start implementation. And that's the only time we can begin to feel the dividends of this effort. You want to agree with me that we have invested so much, in this course, all right? And thank God where we are going now is not as far as where we are coming from. Of course, if you also look at the National Assembly now, you can see more commitment, on their part, working together, the two chambers working together, addressing areas of concern by all the stakeholders. And whether you like it or not, I mean, it's a very interesting aspect. And I can tell you, by the time eventually these things are passed, these bills are passed to law, that is when we'll be able to appreciate the value, of what we are putting into it. But I think all the stakeholders, you see, the majority of people who never bought into it, ab initio, when the bills were forwarded, I mean, they were forwarded to National Assembly. Right now, they are seeing it from a different perspective. And I think we must give kudos, to the Reform Committee, for the enormity of engagement, extensive engagement, because it's that engagement and enlightenment that is actually, changing the pedestrian. Of course, they are not rigid. I mean, look at the VAT aspect, for instance. They were recommending the particular formula for sharing. When the governors came, of course, not that they kicked against it, I will not say they kicked against it, but they felt it should be done better. And at the end of the day, we are getting to a level where there is consensus. Of course, the governors now say, okay, fine. Instead of, as against your former proposition, now let's look at derivation. Let's look at the sharing formula for VAT. For now, anything that has to do with increase in VAT, let's suspend it. Well, fine. I mean, there is a technical, consensus on that. Now, the issue of the sharing formula. Okay, how do we do it? They don't have any issue with derivation. They don't have any issue with equalization. They don't have any issue with population. But they're saying, let us change it so that, it can be more beneficial. And that's why the 50-30, 50-30-20 arrangement appears to be agreeable to all parties. I mean, if you look at labor have done their own. If you look at all the sectors, quite a number of stakeholders, they have expressed their concern. And I think now with the public hearing, you can see that we're actually making remarkable progress. And I'm hoping that by the time all the, deliberations currently going on between the two chambers of the House of Assembly are concluded, I mean, that will probably take us to, the next review stage, which of course will probably take us to, at least, is that the third reading or whatever it is before it becomes something that we can pass to the president for his answer. But I believe that the commitment level is rising on both parties, I mean, from all angles. And I have no doubt that we are not going to allow the efforts that we are put into this process, to be in vain.
I must thank you, Mr. Peter Adebayo. That's much our time can take. I hope to see you when you're back to the country. Mr. Peter Adebayo is the lead consultant, CEO, 2612 Consulting and Professional Services. Thank you for your time. We appreciate this.
Thank you so much, Tolu.
All right, then. Well,